use a tool called, and what this tool does is says, we're going to draw a shape around a piece of geography in the community. And generally what we're talking about is a place that's been blighted or underutilized that you want to bring up to higher standards and you want to be inviting to the community. Localities have to pass a referendum to allow the locality to use that tool, and that happened here in 2006. And then in 2019, the commission and I sought to find, where could we best use this? And so we carved out 6 tax allocation districts in the community, and generally all places that were initially built out somewhere between the very early part of the last century and the 1950s, where we had some access to infrastructure, things like water and sewer and highway or loop access. You had fiber data cable, but what we had is a very old use sitting on top of that dirt. And I think there's probably no better exemplification of use of this tool than the mall property. As everybody knows, malls in the United States have effectively gone away as a viable commercial entity. Everybody's shopping online and sees those packages on their doorstep. And so retail as a standalone use is really no longer a phenomenon. I mean, even in a sort of strip mall kind of environment. So that was an ideal place for a tax allocation district. Now, the way that things work within that district is as the value rises, the former value tax revenue continues to go into the school district and continues to go into the local government. But that rise in value goes back into the project for a limited period of time. It may be for 10 or 15 or 30 years. And in Clark County, what we've done is we've said we wanted to see most of those dollars directed to one of 4 areas. We wanted those directed to youth development facilities, to job generation, to affordable housing, or to public infrastructure we need. And in the mall project, we've got elements of all of those. And from a high level, if you think about the west side of Athens, it's the part of town where we've seen some increase in population. It obviously closer to Metro Atlanta. And what we want is that 75 acres to be a vibrant piece of town, not only for future residents and users of that area, but for friends of mine who live on Huntington Drive or who live on Cleveland Road or who live out as far as the Caterpillar plant and the community out there. And so this plan, which has been evolving for several years, and I think we'll get into conversation about that, provides that opportunity for vitality, not only for on-site use, but for all of those neighbors who, of course, don't want a declining property to be in their backyard. So I'll stop there.
David, you're on mute now.
Got it. Thanks, John. Can you talk more specifically about the history of this project and an overview of the current plan?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So I've been engaged with members of the project development team for about 2.5 years. Initially, they purchased one piece of the property because the way that 75 acres is parceled out, it's not all a single property. And so the development team initially purchased the former movie theater site, and we're looking at a development there. And so I talked to them about the benefits of the tax allocation district model. And as they evolved the potential project, they got options on the rest of the property, as I understand it. And well over a year ago, they looked at a site plan for the whole property. And it was a site plan that would have put up a lot of 2- and 3-story garden style apartments, not unlike those that we might have seen 30 or 40 years ago. And knowing that some of those properties from 30 and 40 years ago really had not aged well, the Planning Commission and myself and a lot of members of the County Commission said, we really want a higher quality environment because we're talking about so much acreage and we're talking about such a critical place in the overall geography of Clark County. We want something that's going to have lots of public space. We want a property that's going to have amenities like those that we're putting in on the public sector side, on the Firefly Trail and the Greenway, and those sort of spaces. And we want to lean more heavily into the youth development piece. So the development team stepped back and they said, we hear you loud and clear. Let us go back to the drawing board. And to their great credit, they did that. And they put together a plan that really every professional staff member on our side who worked on it said, check the boxes for that individual need, check the boxes for open space, check the boxes for effective stormwater management and outdoor recreational space, check the boxes for the tree canopy that we're trying to enhance in the community, and check the boxes for connectivity to all of those surrounding neighborhoods, which of course is a big piece of this. We didn't want an inward facing project. We wanted one that was a good neighbor. So we've gotten to that point now. Our professional staff, in conjunction with some of our outside consultants, have been interacting with the development team to come up with what's called a community benefits arrangement that's parallel with the plan development physical site plan. And of course, that plan development physical site plan has been out there in the public sphere since November of last year. But you need this financial arrangement that goes in tandem with it. And so we're in the final throes of that right now. We're certainly getting some late hour requests to be part of that. It's challenging when that happens. I oftentimes do instruction for newly elected officials, and I let them know always that when you're working on any project, whether it's internal or in partnership, the best way to operate is to be very structured and to make sure your needs are known early on so that your needs are well integrated into the overall plan. So, we're in what's got to be the last week of this, because by law, we've got to either approve or disapprove a plan development next Tuesday. So I'll stop there.
John, anything you want to add on that? Add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the process, it's interesting, and again, hats off to the development team and really to the staff for kind of sticking to their guns on the original plan that was submitted last year, and that they wanted more out of it. W&A got involved, I think, in March or April of this past year after they realized that the development plan they had was lacking, that they had originally submitted. And we started with an open slate. I mean, we completely did away with that old plan and said, hey, look, we have all the comments from the Planning Commission. We have all the staff comments. We started having meetings with staff, the Parks and Rec Department, the Greenways guys, the bikes people, the planning staff, public works, public utilities, transportation, all were met with and offered an opportunity for input, as well as the elected officials. I mean, we were having meetings early on with them as well. And, so we had to drive the process from the plan standpoint first, to come up with a plan that we believe could get through the Planning Commission and the Mayor and Commission as a binding PD. And I think it's important for everybody to know that plan is binding, and that's one of the things that gives kind of this structure a lot of teeth for the community to know that they're going to get what was promised out of this. So everything that's in our plan and in our report for that PD is it can't be changed. It runs with the land. So anyway, we developed the plan. And then the next big hurdle for us, really knowing that we were going to utilize this TAD, the plan, I mean, it's a Taj Mahal plan, guys. I mean, it's a community plan that is generational. It's probably the most transformational plan that I've had the opportunity to work on in Athens Park, really anywhere in the country in my 25 years, as far as what it'll do for the west side of Athens. But that comes with a cost when you add all those elements that Kelly mentioned before. Athens doesn't command the rent structure that Atlanta does, or for the leasing of the retail, where Atlanta, Buckhead may be getting 40 or 50 bucks a foot. Athens is getting, 20, 25. So, I mean, there's a cost associated with all these elements. So our next task was really to take the plan and, have some preliminary architecture. We did preliminary engineering to make sure everything would work. And then we priced it with Balfour Beatty. I mean, we brought them in as part of the team, priced the plan and said, how much is the plan going to cost? Put together a massive pro forma on the overall development that ran out for 30 years, and said, it's basically, we had to solve for the delta. We had a a minimum ROI, return on investment, that we could, be comfortable with, because we've got to go out and get private financing on this, whether it's private equity or conventional bank debt or whatever. And those lenders and those people will look at our pro forma and say, this is an acceptable return on investment for the amount of risk associated with a plan like this. So we had to get to that point. And it really, I hate to boil it down too simply, but it's essentially a math equation. It's how many dollars do we need from this TAD district to put into this plan to be able to make it function at an acceptable ROI. And I think that, a side note is the commission have all received a letter from their consultant, an email, I believe, that says that the ROI that we're projecting is commensurate with other projects of this scale, size, and magnitude. So once we solve for that equation, the $189 million is the number that everybody knows out there in the community. That is the number of dollars it takes to build this plan, finance this plan, and put this incredible project on the ground as it was designed with the input from the community. Then and only then could we really submit the plan development, which Kelly mentioned had been in the public since November. It was actually probably submitted to the planning department back in August, maybe September. And then we submitted the TAD application, also, in the public sector in October, I think, where we outlined those public benefits and what was included in the plan.
So John, the cost does, that's a big number. $189 million is a big number. So can you just reiterate? Where do those funds come from? Is that coming out of our direct tax dollars, or where does that money come from?
No, absolutely not. That's the beauty of the TAD, the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act, that was passed, decades ago. It's been utilized around Atlanta and other cities in the state of Georgia. Very strict rules and regulations on how the funding gets done and what the funding can be used for. So, if you think of it like, basically, when I talk to people, I say no existing tax dollars are going into this to fund this project. Zero. The only dollars that we have access to over the 30-year period of time are dollars that we generate after we build something and the tax assessor reevaluates the taxes on the mall project only. So, our project, as soon as we get vertical construction out there, the tax assessor will come out and say, well, it's not worth, I think on the tax digest right now, the mall's at like $25 million. Once we build the first phase infrastructure, they come out and reevaluate it. It may be worth $150 million. And then they'll tax that. The taxes from the 25 million still go into the general fund. Everything above that goes into the tax allocation district bucket. And then once those dollars are there, and only then can we make a requisition request to start getting repaid for some of the stuff that we've done that the developers having to front the cost for the whole project. And that's another key element here, David, is that this is a pay-go model TAD. It's a terminology that, prior to me being involved in this project, I probably hadn't ever used that term, but essentially the difference is, there's some TADs that you can do a bond up front for, and there's some that you have to do a pay-go model. And we can't really do a bond up front for this because, it's not going to kick off any dollars until we actually lease apartments or lease retail space for a citizen to be willing to buy a bond. So the pay-go model basically says, developer, you put all the dollars in up front, you increase the increment, and then you request to get paid back for those dollars over time. Which is also, I think it's a good time to note that there's a bucket of dollars that we've requested. I think it's $48 million for financing costs. Again, a totally allowed and legal use under the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act. And those dollars are set aside kind of specifically for us to be able to utilize for finance, and not debt service, but just the cost of financing when we have to put in the money up front and get it back over such a long period of time. Incredible vehicle, actually. And I'll give you a little juxtaposition. One of the things that I've heard thrown out there in the public is Caterpillar, right? And that, I was involved in the Caterpillar project in 2012, 2011, very transformative project for West Athens, 1,400 jobs created. By the way, we're creating over 1,000 in the small project. But I think, with Caterpillar, I know it's been said that we only put in $30 million and, we got 1,400 jobs, but that's not the case. First of all, you did put in $31.5 million in conjunction with Oconee County, but that was existing tax-based dollars, not TAD dollars. But then the state came in and put in about another $125 million of benefits, and Caterpillar only had to put in $175 million. So the Caterpillar deal, while it was a great deal, I'm a big fan of economic development vehicles like that. Just want everybody to know that, that deal was, they put in 175 and the county and the state ended up having to put in about 150. And the total cost of the project was around 200. Well, it actually ended up a little bit more, but around $200 million on paper is what that deal was. So, there's a bunch of different vehicles. This is the best one that I've seen, because it doesn't burden the existing tax base at all at any time in the process. I was asked a question the other day about, what happens if you don't get to the $189 million in 30 years? The taxpayer is going to have to pick that up and pay for that. And the answer is no. I mean, that's not legal under the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act. The only dollars we can get are those dollars that we generate. So there will never be a burden on the tax base for any of these dollars. And if we don't get to the 189 million, then the developer, those dollars come out of their pocket and they bear the burden of not increasing the increment to the point that it needs to be increased to.
And John, that's all based on the evaluation of the property. If the property is not evaluated at the level that we expect,
right,
then that thus comes the reduction in the amount of municipal funds that would be available.
That's right. And interestingly enough, it's been an incredible process to work through this with staff and to see how the wheels turn on this thing, because the county has their own financial group that is advising them, and then we have our financial group that's advising us, and both were producing reports. And I think our estimate, we were very conservative, obviously, because we got to try to predict this stuff out for 30 years, whether that's cap rates, interest rates, lease rates, square footage of lease for retail. All that has to be predicted for a very long period of time. So we were conservative in our analysis, and I think we projected something like a $475 million final value of the mall. And I believe the counties came in at around 650 or 635, somewhere in that range. So, somewhere in the middle of that is where, it'll probably land. Hopefully it lands over 650 million, honestly, because we've got to drive that increment as fast as we can. We want this project to go as quickly as possible to establish that increment, to do that. And just to note, there's also been some question in the community of, well, do you have $189 million of qualified expenses to be able to get that money under the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act? And Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the report from their financial consultant noted that there's probably qualified expenses of about $425 million on this project, because that Georgia Powers Redevelopment Act is pretty broad, and it's intentionally broad because the whole purpose here is to take a piece of property that is not performing for the citizens of a community in the way that it could, and attract someone who's willing to come in and develop it, and be able to pay for some of those expenses that are necessary to be able to have an appropriate ROI.
That's right. And so it could be any hard costs or soft costs that are associated with ultimate new value. And an important point about the ultimate new value is, whether it's $475 million or $615 million, the year after the TAD burns off, both the county government and the school district get this enormous windfall, because from that point forward, they're getting full value back into their general funds. And so again, it's a limited vehicle. It's not forever. It's for, in this case, about 29 years.
And we've actually gone one step further, David, on that and said we have kind of a double cap on what we can get. We can, at the end of 30 years, we cannot get any more than 29% of the value, the appraised value. And we also can't get more than 189 million. So if we get to 189 million in year 25 or 26, like Kelly says, it burns off and all those dollars then go back into the tax digest. Really an important piece of information there.
Yes. So it's a maximum amount. It's a maximum time limit of 30 years, but it can be based on evaluation, it can be shorter than that.
Right.
Okay.
And, I would like to say one thing again, this is all, I get all this feedback and hear all this feedback from people, snippets. One snippet is that, well, the county's putting in, I don't remember what the number is right now, Kelly. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's like 62 million or something for urban development, urban style development. And I feel like that's being translated in the community that the county's paying for an apartment building. And that's absolutely not the case. The plan that we were asked to generate was a plan that had more density, more vertical construction, more parks and green space, more walkability, more open area, more trees. So when you build vertical and you increase density, it increases the cost of buildings. Just one example is that in the first plan that was submitted, it basically took the existing parking lot of the mall and put, like Kelly said, 2, 3, 4-story buildings in that existing parking lot. So, essentially the parking spaces for that plan were free, right? Well, when we were asked to do the urban model where we're, creating over almost 20 acres of new green space out of that sea of parking out there, build vertical buildings that require elevators, but it also requires parking deck parking because we were asked to eliminate surface parking. Well, parking deck parking right now is $30,000 a space. Mm-hmm. So you start taking up free parking and putting it into parking decks, so the parking, the elevators, and then even we had to change construction type. So you go from a specific type under the IBC to another type under the IBC, where the cost of construction goes up, 30-40% on every square foot that you're building out there. So when we talk about the that $60 million or whatever that number was in our application to build an urban model, that is what those dollars is supplementing, not that the county's building an apartment. First of all, the first apartment complex built out there it'll be much more costly than that, but that's what those dollars are for.
Yeah, I got you.
Those cost considerations that John mentioned, we're really familiar with because we're facing the same thing on the North Downtown project on the bones of the former Bethel Homes. We didn't want a low quality project there either. We wanted to go vertical. We wanted a lot of green space. We wanted an amenitized pond. And so as a result, the per unit cost is greater when you do higher quality work, but that also means it's work that's going to last and that 100 years from now is still going to be attractive.
Gotcha. How long is the project going to take?
Well, I said earlier, look, we don't get $1 unless we drive the increment. So, our goal is if we get done on Tuesday, it's foot on the gas pedal, man. They want to build this thing as quickly as they possibly can within the bounds of market leasing and stuff like that. We've got a senior housing component, we've got multifamily, we've got to tear down 3/4 of the mall and put a new facade on the mall and create this corridor green space park area that looks a lot like Avalon, who I'm sure a lot of you guys have been to. Our best guess is that we might could do the whole thing in as little as 5 years, 5 to 7 years. Another point of that I've heard out there is that in our community benefits document, though, we've had to commit to a schedule because if we default, then the county government has the ability to basically take the tax allocation district away from us. So again, we've had to try to predict like a worst case scenario of, what can we possibly live with that won't terminate the agreement. And Kelly, I think we landed at somewhere around 2031 is the outside date for us to be complete with all phases.
That's right. Yeah.
There's two answers. Yeah, there's two answers to that question, right? We want to go as fast as we can, and we'll go as fast as market conditions will allow. but we have a backstop because, you know, we don't want this agreement to terminate when we're halfway through this deal. And I mean, we want to deliver that transit pad for the county as quickly as we can. We want them to get their dollars so they can build. Part of that 189 million is about $9 million that's allocated that the county will retain to build a transit station like the one they have downtown. That's so important to get that transit run all the way out to the county line. So, you know, all those dollars also are not going, you know, back to our project. That was a big part of what we're doing.
One of the questions from one of our listeners was how many square feet of that project or of the project are devoted to retail?
I got some information here. Let me see if I got that. I think it's about 80,000 is what we ended up with.
Yeah, I think it's 80,000 new square feet of retail on top of the Belk. And of course, you know, we've not spoken about this, but Belk has a multi-decade lease on the project with lots of pretty tight stipulations about what they have to have access to, including immediately proximate parking and a view shed from Atlanta Highway. So, you know, in the many cooks in the kitchen phenomenon that is this project, they are one of the cooks.
I got you. So 80,000.
I'll give you some stats here, David, to answer your question, because we got an physical impact analysis, which, by the way, if you extrapolate out for 30 years, is about a $5 billion physical impact to Athens, Clarke County and the surrounding region. And if anybody wants to know the details of that, I have those. But there's 352,000 square feet of retail and office space with $101 million in annual sales revenue. Another important point I think to note is that because we're on a lot of the redevelopment projects in Atlanta access multiple redevelopment vehicles, you know, like Caterpillar, we mentioned some of those job tax credits, different things like that. We're only accessing the TAD. So the sales tax dollars off that $100 million, which to the county, Kelly, 4 million-ish, that keeps going to the county. We've got about 1,183 new housing units. And we'll create 1,183, let's see, a little over 1,000 jobs full-time, but also 770 jobs through the construction process.
Yeah. John, is the plan, or John or Kelly, is the plan available for public review? How can we access the plan?
Yes, everything's online. Kelly can tell you where it's at, but they've been posting stuff religiously as we've been submitting it. And I think the community development agreement is as well.
Yes.
About 100-page document.
Is linked to our economic development webpage. So if you look there, if you just go to our website, accgov.com, and you just type in the word mall, you'll get a link.
So what are the expected implications on traffic? I mean, so certainly we know with growth, the demographic growth coming east from Atlanta, that is just, I mean, Barrow County is already the second or third fastest growing county in Georgia, and Jackson County is number one. The growth is coming this way. What are the traffic implications for Atlanta Highway specifically related to this project?
Well, I'll let Kelly speak to the GDOT portion, but we know that our plans incorporate the GDOT plans that are already formed for that area for upgrading Atlanta Highway proper. But we also, part of our TAD dollars are being spent on putting in 3 roundabouts inside the mall project to help that traffic flow. One on Huntington Road, one out the back entrance, and one at our front entrance. But GDOT does have plans for that. And then we, as always, have to submit a traffic study where it's a 300-page probably study, 5 or 6 intersections that look at the existing traffic plus traffic that may be rising, plus our traffic added to it to make sure that those intersections are still functioning at an appropriate level, once the project is built out. Kelly may have some more information on the timing of the GDOT.
Yeah, absolutely. So a handful of things that are important to think about regarding traffic. We've talked about GDOT, and so GDOT is going to begin to build the loop interchange there at Highway 10 and Highway 78 beginning late this year. They've got plans already analyzed for that. And so that improvement project is really going to stem the entire corridor, Cleveland Road at Atlanta Highway, all the way up to Timothy and Mitchell Bridge Road at Atlanta Highway, where the Publix is. So that's going to include some widening. It's going to include better paths and sidewalks. So currently, if you wanted to walk from the mall property over to the Barnes and Noble, you're taking your life in your hands. But there's going to be a wide path there for folks who are on foot. And part of what's going to happen too is lengthening of those on and off ramps so that traffic doesn't back up onto the loop. The other point that's always important to make when it comes to urban density is that in Clark County right now, there are a few more than 40,000 people who commute into the county every day to work. Obviously, some of those people are going to continue to do that, but some people would love to live in Clark County and get to their job at St. Mary's or Piedmont Athens Regional or the University of Georgia or a banking institution downtown, and simply don't have a place to live because we're sort of housing stressed community. And so in many cases, what you're going to have is somebody who's now driving from Winder or driving from Monroe or driving from Lawrenceville, who rather than driving 25 or 35 or 45 miles will be driving just 5 miles to work from this property.
Guys, one of the questions that popped up, and man, we've had some great questions thus far. One of the questions is, can you talk about the housing units? I think we noted 1,100 new housing units. What does that look like, and how does that address sort of the affordable housing or housing opportunity issues that that this and every community across Georgia and the country face?
The plan that is before the mayor and commission to be approved today has about roughly 1,000 new multifamily housing units, which includes an entire building of senior housing, which again is for those familiar with real estate development, that's the only class that you can actually kind of discriminate towards. I guess I would use that term, where you can set aside 55 and older or whatever. And so it has a senior component, it has a multifamily component, and then what we're doing right now, what's on the table, and again, we started down this path and said this the whole time because affordable housing costs dollars, right? The county has put forward a great inclusionary housing policy that they adopted last year. And we followed that policy, we actually exceed that policy in a lot of ways with the number of units that we're putting on the ground from an affordability standpoint. But those units have to be exactly like the market rate units. I mean, if we're putting in granite countertops, we got to put in granite countertops, same size bathroom, same size bedroom, same size everything. And they have to be spread throughout the project. And then they have to kind of marry up with our unit mix as far as 1, 2s, and 3s. So, if we got 20% one bedrooms, 20% of the affordable housings have to be one bedroom. So we get a variety. We are putting in 10% of all of our multifamily units will hit an 80% AMI mark from an affordability standpoint, and which will equate to about 99 units in the overall development that'll be set aside for affordable, and those units will be reported on monthly and annually to I think it's the community development department.
Community development.
Yeah, housing and community development department. So the oversight will be done by the county on those units, and then people qualify for them. We've been asked to give some deference to the school system employees as a part of their request for us to do for those units, because we know that those employees probably qualified. One interesting thing to note: there's been a lot of talk about the 80% AMI not being enough, and when I say AMI, that's area median income. Rough numbers for our area is about $80,000 for a family of 4, but it decreases as the number of people in the family decrease, and so we're at 80% of AMI, which is around $62,000 for a family of 4. Now that may seem like a lot, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, the county's 2 lowest paid employees in Clark County with a family of 4 would qualify for that 80% of AMI on the apartment. So we got 10%, but then we also added over 200 units of single family attached townhouses that'll be sold, fee simple. That surrounds the mall and really integrates the plan into the surrounding neighborhoods with regard to kind of a step down in density as we get closer to those other single family neighborhoods. So 1,200 plus units altogether, 99 affordable units at 80% of AMI.
Okay.
And while as an advocate for affordability, I would say that more is always better. And I would always like more. I also have to live in the real dollars and cents and hard sticks and bricks world too, and recognize that not every project is going to provide every necessary affordable unit. And there are a lot of other vehicles that we're using. Of course, we're devoting SPLOST dollars for the North Downtown project. We're working with some private developers to use low-income housing tax credits on other projects, which, if you want to say, what moves the meter nationally, it's those low-income housing tax credits or LIHTCs. So there are a lot of other things that we're going to be working on. But if you just want to think in a numeric basis, all right, well, how does this stack up against other things done in the county? The two other projects in the last decade that have involved this many income controlled units at 80% in one fell swoop is the Columbia Brookside project from about a decade ago off Hawthorne Avenue and the currently underdeveloped North Downtown project. There's nothing else in terms of this volume that would have been brought online in a single project.
Both of which, Kelly, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, are supplemented with the regular tax-based dollars, or some government funds that came in, right? Whereas
from other sources.
From other sources, whereas this is 100% funded by our TAD, and I think that we start dealing with these big numbers, guys, and I understand they are big numbers, right? I mean, I live in this world. To some degree, Kelly lives in this world with government projects, but you start talking about 180 million. I think this is a really good time for me just to run down the quick list, because everybody starts keying on what's $180 million and we're getting 10% affordability. You got to be able to do more. And remember, I started my conversation by saying this was a math equation. At the end of the day, if we can't finance this project, then we can't build this project. It's a zero-sum game. It's all in or nothing, right? Because the plan is binding. We got to go to the private market and borrow the dollars, and $189 million is the number that it takes. But in return for that, in addition to the affordable housing units we talked about, you got a transit station and bus stop, which we've agreed to accelerate the payment for above and beyond and put the county in first priority on so that they can get that built sooner rather than later. We've got a new gridded street system that matches kind of the downtown area. We've got stormwater management, which the county did a report. There's no stormwater management at the mall right now. And there was a report that the county had done probably about 4 years ago that said there's downstream flooding and water quality issues in the middle of Coney River. We're going to address both of those issues with our stormwater management facility. I think I don't even remember. I don't know, 300 million gallons of water or something that'll hold. It's an insane amount. 3 traffic circles, 19 acres of new green space, which is over 25% of the site returned to pervious surface, over 800 new trees, public park space, band shells, a 4,000 square foot Boys and Girls Club with abated rent for 30 years, a 4,000 square foot daycare center with abated rent for 30 years, true mixed use with commercial, office, multi-senior, and single family, 1.5 miles of 12-foot wide walking path and trails and bike paths that came from a specific ask out of Parks and Recreation. We're putting in dollars for sidewalk improvements on Cleveland Road to connect the neighborhood that's out there into our park. We're committing, of course, to Class A building environments. We've got a minority participation, commitment in the CBA, and we've got some housing priorities for the school system. So, we know that Cleveland Road School is underserved right now. There's not enough kids going to the Cleveland Road Elementary School. So this is actually going to be, I feel like help that school out a little bit. I'm not going to get into how much or how, because I don't live in that world, but I live in the finance and development world.
So interesting question that came through just a minute ago. Multifamily housing, oftentimes, once it, is not unheard of, once it gets to 80 or 90% occupied, is sold.
Sure.
And to a different owner. Does the new ownership, if that happened, would the new ownership have to fall under the same
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
single provisions?
I mean, that's a great question, and it's one that I deal with all over the country, right? I mean, the first generation developer has to exit the project at some point in time, and they'll sell that property. They may sell it in pieces and phases. The senior may be sold to a REIT. The multi may be sold to somebody who expert in managing multifamily. But it 100%, the total PD and the total CBA runs with the land is the best way I can say it. So no matter who owns that property in the next 30 years, or, some of the benefits, run longer than that. But I mean, it has to be maintained. And the only people that can change the use of that property or the CBD would be a vote by the county government, the mayor and commission. Nothing, we're bound to that. The next owner, it doesn't matter how many times it does. And I'll tag on because I know that there's probably a question out there somewhere, David. If it hadn't been asked, it will be, is this just another student multifamily development? And the answer to that is no. And you say, well, how do you know that? I mean, again, we can't discriminate. If a student wants to lease out there, they can lease out there. But they're too far away from downtown. Where the students want to be. They want to be close to the university. But there's also another big give in the PD that we've committed to that almost guarantees that it will not be student multifamily at any scale. And that is that we don't have bed bath parity and we don't have bed parking parity. Students want 4-bedroom units with 4 baths and 4 parking spaces.
Right.
We don't have any 4-bedroom units, and we have 3-bedroom units with only 2 parking spaces and 3-bedroom units with only 2 baths. So I mean, that's essentially the hammer the government can bring to the table to try to. It's the same. We've got the same situation kind of on the deal where the old varsity property was when that gets built, where we limited bed bath parity and bed parking parity to make sure that was a market rate deal.
Yeah. Kelly, anything on that? I mean, I agree with John that
Yeah,
thing like this.
I guess another layer of depth is that part of the community benefits agreement is a land use restriction agreement, which is commonly used on properties that are set up for mixed income. And so that's a vehicle that HUD has used for decades. And so we're very familiar with that. It's not a new enterprise. That's something we do all the time.
So, we're looking at 30 years. A lot of times multifamily, and Kelly, this goes back to the point I think that you made earlier that you want to build quality, because if it's not quality, then it falls into a state of demise pretty quickly. The question I think comes with, is there any assurance or any assurance that 5, 10, 15 years down the road that property doesn't become blighted?
I think there are probably a couple of things to point to. And one is the kind of environments that tend to degrade and the kind of environments that tend not to degrade. And an amenity-rich environment that has lots of public space, which means you've got lots of eyes on the street and lots of individuals interacting, and particularly one that was built to a high quality at the outset. That's the kind of environment that tends not to degrade. If you think about the environments in this particular community that have degraded, whether it's the Oaks Apartments behind the Arby's off West Broad Street, or the series of apartment complexes behind the Willowwood Shopping Center on the corner of Lexington Highway and Gaines School Road. Those were properties that were not well amenitized. They were really built as single-use environments. They were built without any public spaces. They were built without gathering spaces, and thus they don't have eyes on them, and they don't have people interacting and coming and going. This is a very different kind of environment. It's much more akin to downtown. And I've been emphasizing that this really is going to be the town center of the West Side. And so when you've got folks in that senior facility, when you've got neighbors on Cleveland and Huntington, when you've got people who are attending concerts at the band shell, those are the kind of places that stay vibrant for a long time.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further and throw the dollars and cents in there, and just, because we go back to that pay-go model, right? I mean, where we don't get our money until the 29th year at $650 million. We've got to drive the increment. You can't drive the increment if the property's blighted. You can't drive the increment if the rent rates aren't increasing. You can't drive the increment if the retail is not activated and vibrant. You can't drive the increment if we don't have a transit station out there. So, I mean, there's a real incentive in this case for the developer to continue to maintain a Class A property and throughout the course of the TAD.
I get it. Kelly, I think you opened up noting that the project has been has been available for folks to take a look at, certainly the commissioners to take a look at since October-ish. But you also noted that there were some 23rd hour add-ons. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So a couple of things that are now baked in that weren't part of this discussion 6 weeks ago is the component where there's going to be direct engagement to school district employees, the set aside of 4,000 square feet for an early learning center is a new component. And then the minority and women-owned business engagement is a new component too. Right now, all of those are getting a little bit of detail added to them so that they have greater teeth and greater specificity. More recently, in fact, yesterday afternoon, there was discussion of having some minority and women-owned business retail or office space as a set aside under the same terms that the county is getting for our workout facility and our police department that's on the property, which is a frozen rent basis. And so that's been delivered to the development team. And then there was the request for enhanced affordability in some of those affordable units. So those are a couple of the big moving pieces right now that need to get resolved before first the Mall Area Redevelopment Committee that's comprised of myself, Commissioner Houle and Commissioner Hamby, and Linda Davis and Dr. Mumby Anderson from the school district sit on. And then the mayor and commission have to hear this subsequent to that on the 7th next week.
And from our standpoint, David, just to note, we turned in our application with our ask and our pro forma. Again, let's go back to that math equation. We got to hit a certain ROI. And we had our ask out there in October of what we could do with the dollars that were available to us. But even since then, prior to yesterday, we've probably added another, I don't know, $12 million of costs that the developer is going to have to be burdened with since October up until yesterday. So, at the end of the day, if we can't solve for X, if we can't get this project financed, so there's a finite end. And Kelly lives in a policy world with a lot of personalities and a lot of people looking at a lot of different things. I live in a sticks and bricks world with numbers and finance. And, we've given, since our application was submitted, we've agreed that the county will pay no contribution to the maintenance of any of the property, even though they're essentially a tenant with a transit station. We've agreed to give the Board of Education a rent-free daycare center that's 4,000 square feet and giving them another $200,000 to build it out. We've agreed to freezing the police station and wellness center rent, which is 14,000 square feet, which added about $4.7 million to the project cost. We've agreed to an administrative fee to make sure that taxpayers aren't burdened at all with monitoring and kind of mediating through this project. That could run as much as $1.5 million, $1.8 million. We've agreed to pay a verification agent to make sure that the funds are spent equitably and in compliance with the Redevelopment Act. And then, you just heard Kelly tell you a couple of things that came up yesterday, and quite honestly, we're sort of out of rope here. I mean, we're, with the gives that we've given to date, and, everybody wants to know, well, you got $189 million. Can't you just do this? Well, like Kelly said, that the ask for freezing rent for the minority and women-owned business that came up yesterday in the MARC meeting, I mean, that's $4.7 million, that it's going to cost the developer to do that. So, big numbers equate to big numbers, and we're at the point where it's really starting to teeter on whether or not this thing can be financed or not.
So the last couple questions, guys. And Kelly, this is more directed to you. So can you describe what the process looks like going forward? What has to happen in order for, and is Tuesday D-Day? So anything that will be happening between now and Tuesday?
So Tuesday is absolutely the hard stop. So based on our zoning ordinance, we only can hold a zoning matter, including a plan development, for a single cycle. And so that sunsets Tuesday on the 7th. And so we've got to make that determination then, or any developer would have to go back to square one. And obviously concurrent with that, because the developers have an option on the bulk of this property, they can't encumber somebody who doesn't own the property or somebody who does own the property with a PED that they've not agreed to. So the community benefits agreement has to be approved the same night. So leading up to then, this Mall Area Redevelopment Committee, again comprised of myself, Commissioner Houle, Commissioner Hamby, Linda Davis, and Dr. Mumby Anderson from the school district, have to make a recommendation. And then if that's an affirmative recommendation, the commission also has to make an affirmative vote. If the Mall Area Redevelopment Committee denies the recommendation for pursuing the project, then by ordinance, the mayor and commission also have to deny that. So my pitch to the group on the call today is to talk to every one of those individuals I just mentioned and all the county commissioners if you would like to extol the virtues of this project. What I have said to a couple groups, and that I will repeat right here, is that I want my name attached and I want the name of this county attached to a high quality project that's going to serve for generations to come. And what I know I don't want my name attached to is 75 acres of asphalt in time immemorial, because we can look all around these United States and find any number of examples of properties that have just sat dormant and in fact have been detriments to their neighbors, not the least of which is the former Kmart property right here in Clark County. So I don't want to be in that environment a decade from now as a resident, because I'm not going to be in this seat in 4 years.
And I can't stress enough, guys. I mean, if you're at all in support of this project, please email the commissioners, let them know. I mean, I know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and it's typically the people that show up at public hearings are the people that have a bone to pick and are unhappy. We don't usually get a lot of people showing up in support of, but those emails, phone calls, text messages, if you have their numbers, there's a public hearing, I think on Friday from 4 to 5, if anybody wants to show up and support or against, right? I mean, everybody gets to pick their path here, right? But please let your voice be heard if you are in support of it. This has been an incredibly difficult process for many reasons, and so much time and resources spent on the private side and on the public side with staff. I mean, we're probably $1.5 million to $2 million into pre-development costs on this project right now out of pocket. And it's a rare occasion when you have the vehicle of the TAD have been already established by the community. You have the site that is begging to be rehabilitated, and then you have a development team that has the financial, the experience, and everything else to come together and be able to pull this off. And quite frankly, even if the commission could hold this further, and they can't, we're out of time. I mean, the mall, the owner of the mall has said no more. I mean, we had to go back and beg for another 2 weeks just to get to the 7th, and hard stop, no question. Our team is out, and they'll just continue to operate the mall as they will, for however long that they choose to do that. And I don't think, given the process and the difficulty of the process, I think it will be, as Kelly said, really, I mean, we're going to miss a generational opportunity here, in my opinion, if we can't get this done by Tuesday.
So just to reiterate, Tuesday is a hard stop. Are you taking public comment on Tuesday night, or is it all Friday?
We're taking public comment Tuesday night at the front end of the meeting. There's also going to be public input at this Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. meeting.
Hey, I'm so appreciative of you, of both of you guys, for being here. So appreciative of the consideration of what we can be and what we can look like. It takes courage to jump on that ship of envisioning where we are, where we can be. And so thank you both. You know, I would also reiterate that your voice is critical. Again, whatever side you choose, your voice is critical. And as John had mentioned, oftentimes this is not an opportunity for us to be silent, right? It's
Right.
if we're supportive, vocalize your support. If you're opposed, vocalize your opposition. Our purpose today was to provide information in order to be able to help make that determination for your part. So I just want to thank you, Kelly and John, for being on today, and thank everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. I appreciate the opportunity, David. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.